Do you actually know which pool chemicals are worth buying or which ones are just a complete waste of money? I'm Matt from Swim University, and I've been in the pool business for over 30 years. And I've seen a lot of chemicals and a lot of snake oil. So I'm gonna rank the most popular pool chemicals from worst to best so that you know exactly what to buy and what you can skip entirely. Also, I don't sell chemicals, so everything I say here is just my straight up, honest opinion. And I definitely don't hold back on telling you which are my least favorites. So here's how the tier list works. S tier is the top. It means it works great, it's easy to use, and it's worth every penny. I recommend you buy it. A tier means that it's highly effective with some minor trade-offs. B tier means it's good, but it depends on the situation. C tier means it's fine, but you can probably do better or find it cheaper elsewhere. D tier means that I usually don't recommend it and I would just use something else or nothing. And F tier means I would just skip it entirely. It's either a waste of money, a gimmick, or probably both. So let me know in the comments if you disagree with any of these rankings. Now, all of the chemicals I'm gonna mention are covered here in the Pool Care Handbook. So if you want a physical guide on pool care and how to use each one of these chemicals, you can grab your copy over at swimu.com/book. Okay. First up is balancing chemicals. So let's start with alkalinity increaser. Now you'll need something to adjust your alkalinity, but you can just stop buying this and start buying baking soda because the active ingredient in alkalinity increaser is sodium bicarbonate, which is baking soda. Now Arm & Hammer sells large bags of it for a fraction of what you pay for pool branded versions. It's the same active ingredient and it gets you the same results. Now, if the alkalinity increaser that you find says sodium hydrogen carbonate on the label, that's the same thing. So I'm giving this C tier. Now it's fine if you already have it, but switch to baking soda in the future. Now we have pH increaser, which is sodium carbonate. Now this raises your pH, and a pH adjuster is important to have on hand, but you can get the same active ingredient, sodium carbonate, at a store as washing soda or soda ash. Now pool branded pH increaser is just a markup. So you wanna check the label and find sodium carbonate, and you've got the same product for less. So if you need a pH increaser, it's just overpriced when it's marketed for pools. So I'm gonna put this in the C tier. pH decreaser, which is sodium bisulfate. pH decreaser is a dry acid that lowers your pH and slightly reduces your alkalinity. It's easy to store, and it's easy to measure. Now, there's another chemical on this list that does the same job, and I'm gonna get to that in a second, but it's nowhere near as convenient to handle. So to me, this is a must-have in my book. Not that book, but my book. I'm putting pH decreaser in S tier. Now let's move on to muriatic acid. So muriatic acid does the same job as pH decreaser. It lowers your pH and it lowers your alkalinity. And you can use it to wash your concrete pool deck. You can use it to clean your filter grids. You can get scale off your surfaces. But it's a liquid acid, so it means it's more dangerous to handle. So I recommend using pH decreaser over muriatic acid to most pool owners, especially if you're new or if you're only using it to just lower your pH. Now again, muriatic acid works, and if you already have it on hand, that's fine. Just be careful when you use it. So muriatic acid is great, but I don't think it's as good as pH decreaser just in terms of like how you handle it. So I'm gonna put this in A tier. Okay, let's talk about sanitizers. So first up are chlorine tablets, which are Trichlor. Now, chlorine tablets are kind of the go-to for adding chlorine to your pool. They're easy to handle. You can just put it in a floater or a chlorinator, and your pool will just get a constant dose of chlorine without you having to manually add it every single day. Now, the minor downside to this is that they've got cyanuric acid or CYA. Now, cyanuric acid's good because it protects your chlorine from being burned off by the sun if your pool is in direct sunlight, but if you're not keeping an eye on your CYA levels over time, they can creep up. And too much stabilizer, too much CYA makes your chlorine less and less effective because it overprotects it. Now, chlorine tablets are A tier for me because they're great for consistent dosing, which is convenient, but you wanna watch out for CYA. That's it. Next one is liquid chlorine, which is sodium hypochlorite. Liquid chlorine is just concentrated bleach. Now, because it's already in liquid form, it works really fast when you add it to your pool, and it doesn't contain cyanuric acid, which makes it a great option if your CY levels are already on the high side. But the downside, in my opinion here, is just comes down to pure convenience. It's heavy to handle and it takes up a lot of space. And for a large pool, you're gonna need a ton of it. Now for a smaller pool, like under 10,000 gallons, liquid chlorine makes a lot of sense. For anything bigger than that, it can get pretty cumbersome pretty fast. Now you can also use it to shock your pool, which is great, but again, you need a lot of it. So liquid chlorine works really fast and it won't raise your CYA. These are good things, but it's just harder to handle than tablets and you can't auto dose it. So for that, I'm just gonna put it in B tier. Next up is dichlorochlorine granules, which is sodium dichlor. Now, dichlorochlorine comes in granular or powder form, and it behaves a lot like a crushed up chlorine tablet. Not to say that you should crush up a chlorine tablet, but it works like that. So it contains cyanuric acid, just like tablets, but it can also double as a shock treatment, which you can't do with tablets. Now, it dissolves quickly in the water, and it's good for sensitive surfaces, like if you have a fiberglass pool or if you have a saltwater pool. But there's another shock that I recommend more than this, and I'll talk about that next. Now, if you're using it as a sanitizer, unfortunately, you can't put it in an automatic chlorinator or you can't put it in a floater, which means that you have to add it manually every single time. And it contains CYA, so you have to watch out for those levels as well. Now, tablets you can auto-dose, dichlor you can't. And it's less powerful than my favorite type of shock, so for that reason, it lands alongside the liquid chlorine in the B tier. Let's talk about Cal-Hypo shock, or calcium hypochlorite. Now, Cal-Hypo shock is the most powerful pull shock that you can buy. So if you've got cloudy water or an algae problem, this is your go-to. Now, this is the algae killer that's on this list, and I recommend it almost every single time for treating problematic water. It has no cyanuric acid in it, so it's best to add it at night when the sun won't burn it off so fast, but it contains calcium. It's calcium hypochlorite. So if you use it regularly in a saltwater pool, it can cause scale buildup inside your salt cell. Cal-Hypo can also be too powerful if you have a smaller pool, like under 10,000 gallons. But for most pools dealing with a real problem, Cal-Hypo shock is the strongest tool you've got. I really want to say S tier for this one, but I know it doesn't work for every single type of pool, so I'm just gonna put it in A tier. All right, that was chlorine, but there are other ways to sanitize your pool, so let's go through those real quick. Bromine. Now, bromine is totally situational. It's a sanitizer like chlorine, but it's mostly used in indoor pools and hot tubs because it doesn't produce that chlorine smell. And bromine breaks down in sunlight, and CYA doesn't stabilize it, so it's not great for outdoor pools. It's a solid sanitizer in the right setting, but I recommend just going for chlorine if your pool's outside. So I'm gonna put this in the B tier. Salt. Now, I'm kind of sneaking this one in here because I wanted to talk about saltwater systems, and I'm curious what other people think. Personally, I like saltwater pools. I think they have a lot of benefits, but I don't think you should just run out and switch to salt. Here are the pros. You've got less eye and skin irritation, the water feels softer on your skin, and because the saltwater generator makes chlorine automatically, you can just stop buying chlorine and adding chlorine by hand every week. I love that. The cons though. So as your salt system runs, it naturally raises your pH. So you'll need to adjust this quite a bit. And you'll need to check and clean your salt cell every 3 months. There's also a risk of corrosion and etching in your concrete around your pool from the salt. So it's great if you already have it. It's great if you want to switch to one and if you want more stable chlorine levels, but it's not totally maintenance free. And it's not chlorine free like some people think. So for this reason, I'm putting it in the B tier. Biguanides. Now, Biguanide, also called PHMB, is a true chlorine-free sanitizer. And it sounds great on paper. You have no chloramines, it's easy on your skin and eyes, it doesn't break down in direct sunlight, but it locks you into a specific brand's product line. So that means like every product you buy has to be made for a Biguanide system. And if you ever want to switch back to chlorine, you have to fully drain your pool and refill it with fresh water. And it's way more expensive than chlorine. But the worst part is that it's very common that your pool will develop pink slime. And this is a bacteria in your pool that becomes resistant to the Biguanide. And once it takes hold, it's almost impossible to get rid of without fully draining and switching to chlorine. So I would personally just 100% avoid this, which means I am putting it in the F tier. All right, let's move on to some situational chemicals that are maybe harder to decide on. Let's start with calcium hardness increaser, which is calcium chloride. Now, you need to have some calcium in your water to protect your surfaces and your equipment from corrosion. The good news is you really only need to add this about once a year, and only if you have soft water or low calcium hardness. Now, I have a whole video on calcium hardness if you're not sure if you need this. But should you buy calcium hardness increaser? Okay, so the active ingredient in this product is calcium chloride, and that's the same thing as ice melt. Now, if you can find ice melt that's 100% calcium chloride with no other additives, then it's the same thing for less money. So since you might not need it, and there's a cheaper option, C tier. Chlorine stabilizer, which is cyanuric acid. Now, chlorine stabilizer is also called chlorine conditioner, cyanuric acid, or CYA. It goes by many names. And this protects your chlorine from breaking down in the sun. So adding CYA helps the chlorine work longer in the water, especially if you have an outdoor pool that gets a lot of direct sunlight. Now, I have a whole other video on CYA if you're struggling with this one, but do you even need a chlorine stabilizer, like a separate chemical? Well, if you're already adding trichlor tablets or you're using dichlor hydrochlorochlorine, both of these already contain CYA, and you're constantly adding that to the water. But if you're using liquid chlorine or you have a saltwater pool, then you do need to add CYA. So because this one's situational, I'm just gonna put it in B tier. But it's a good chemical. Non-chlorine shock, or potassium monopersulfate. Now this is one of the best pool chemicals that you can have on hand. It's non-chlorine shock, and it oxidizes chloramines, which are used up combined chlorine in your water, and this is what causes that chlorine smell. So when you smell chlorine, it means the chlorine's not actively working in your water. And combined chlorine is just less effective at sanitizing, and it's less active than free chlorine. And this is where non-chlorine shock comes in, because it breaks up that combined chlorine, reactivating your free chlorine so it can do its job again. Now, it does a lot of work for a product with no chlorine in it. It helps clear up cloudy water. It's great to add before or after a large party, and you can swim in just 15 minutes after adding it. You just add it directly to the water, and it's safe for every single type of pool. Now, you might see it labeled as chlorine-free shock or oxidizer, but whatever the label says, the active ingredient is the same. It's potassium monopersulfate, or MPS. So the brand doesn't matter, but I would avoid these all-in-one products that have a bunch of other things besides the oxidizer, like they have an algaecide, a clarifier, a stain and scale prevention, a pH buffer, etc. So I would recommend that every pool owner keep non-chlorine shock on hand as a weekly or a bi-weekly treatment. Because of this, I'm putting it in S tier. I love this stuff. Okay, Polyquat Algaecide. Now before we rate this, let's be clear on what algaecides actually do. They prevent algae. Most of them do not kill an active algae bloom. So if your water is green, this is not gonna work. Now, if your water is balanced and you shock on a regular basis, you don't need to add algaecide. Algaecide makes more sense as a backup insurance policy for when your chlorine drops and you're not around to correct it fast enough. But if you're gonna use an algaecide, I do recommend using a Polyquat Algaecide. If you're going on vacation or you're closing your pool early, that's when I would use it. So this is situational, it's not constant. I'm putting this in C tier. But let's move on to copper-based algaecide. Now, these algaecides work, but the copper in them is also the problem. If you add too much of it to your water, it can turn your pool green, like neon green, or it can stain your surfaces. And I think the risk just isn't worth it when you have Polyquat Algaecide that doesn't carry all those downsides. So if you're gonna use an algaecide, I would use a Polyquat. So for the copper-based ones, I'm putting this in D tier. Now we have Water Clarifier, which is a polymer coagulant. If you're looking for an easy and quick way to clear your pool, even if it's just a little hazy, Clarifier is the best bang for your buck chemical. It takes all of those tiny little particles in your water, that microscopic stuff that's making your water look cloudy, and it clumps them together big enough so that your filter can catch and remove them. Now, most clarifiers work with the same ingredients, so you can buy whatever brand is easiest for you to buy. It's cheap, it's easy to add, and it works pretty fast. Just word of caution, you want to add the absolute recommended dose once a week or maybe every other day if you have a lot of cloudy water to keep your water looking crystal clear. It's not going to cost you that much, but if you add too much of it to your water, it can actually have the reverse effect. So as long as you're taking care of the rest of your pool, it's fantastic, it's inexpensive, and it's just easy to keep on hand. So for this reason, putting it in S tier. Flocculant, which is aluminum sulfate. Now, flocculant works similarly to Clarifier, but instead of making those particles big enough for your filter to filter out, it sinks them to the bottom of your pool in a heavy cloud, and then you just vacuum them out. Now, most of the brands that you buy work the same. They use aluminum sulfate or aluminum chloride as the active ingredient, but here's the catch. You have to be able to vacuum on your filter's waste setting because flocculant cannot go through the filter. But if you've got the right setup and you're willing to vacuum, which is a lot of work, then flocculant is a great move. It's incredibly effective. It's just a little bit more elbow grease on your part. So for this reason, I'm putting it in the A tier. Then you get Stain and Scale Preventer, which is a sequestering agent. Stain and Scale Preventer keeps minerals and metals from depositing on your walls and your surfaces and keeps the copper from staining your pool. So if you have naturally high calcium in your water, or you're filling from well water, or you have high mineral content in your water, this is really important. Now, if you don't have any of these problems, you can completely skip this. Now, you might see this chemical labeled as metal stain and scale control, or if you're just dealing with metals, it might say metal out, or Metal Gone, or even Metal Remover. Now this is especially important for fiberglass pools because high calcium is known to discolor the surface. So if you live in an area where your fill water is already high in calcium or in metals, this chemical might just be your only practical long-term option. It works if you add it regularly, but you don't need to add it at all if you don't have a metal issue or you don't have high minerals in your water. So for this reason, I'm gonna put it in B tier. Finally, I mentioned this kind of at the beginning, we have Phosphate Remover. I do not recommend this chemical. It's just another form of algae preventative and it will not help in an active algae bloom. Now, Phosphate Remover removes phosphates from your pool, and phosphates are food for algae. The goal being that you can starve the algae so that it can't grow. Now, this sounds reasonable until you realize that phosphates get into your pool from almost everything. It's basically impossible to keep them out permanently. So you add Phosphate Remover, it works temporarily, and then the phosphates come right back. And here's the thing, phosphate removers are expensive. Algae cannot grow in a properly chlorinated balanced pool. Period. But if you have chronic algae issues, I would recommend checking out our other video on taking care of that or trying a mineral dispenser before you go out and buy a phosphate remover. So I wouldn't run out and get one. I wouldn't have it on hand. I'm putting this in D tier. So what do you think? Do you agree with this list? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments and let me know if I missed any chemicals that you want me to take on next. And if you want any help making sure that your chemistry levels stay in line, I recommend checking out our Pool Care app. All you have to do is test your water, you enter your test results, and it gives you a custom treatment plan specifically designed for your pool, and it'll tell you exactly what chemicals to add, how much of each to add, and in what order, and how long to wait in between each addition. There's a 7-day free trial to give it a shot. You can check it out over at swimu.com/app. That's it. Thanks for watching, and as always, happy swimming.